Madison Cawthorn? Madison Cawthorn, the ex-Congressman, the crazy kid who went to see Hitler's eagle's nest and said it was on his bucket list. Remember Madison Cawthorn? Remember Madison Cawthorn when he described his shock that here he was elected to the House of Representatives and he'd found that it was fueled by drug-based orgies? And he said all he found in Washington were anti-drug leaders who turned out to be less war on drugs and more plain old I'm on drugs? I hate to think of Madison Cawthorn for a moment, let alone think of Madison Cawthorn for a moment as a truth teller, but what would best explain this exactly from Trump's town hall on Fox last night?
In recent days, you seem to issue a warning that if in the courts, and even the U.S. Supreme Court, if they didn't treat you fairly, that maybe there would be bedlam in the country. Use that word, bedlam in the country. Can you say tonight that political violence is never acceptable?
Well, of course that's right. And of course, I'm the one that had very little of it. Take a look at wars. Again, I wasn't involved in wars. We beat the hell out of ISIS. We won 100%. We brought our troops back home. Look at the violence that we've had. Look at the violence we have recently.
Right, but when you say bedlam, what do you mean?
I think bedlam. I think you look at Joe Biden, it's bedlam.
Of course that made no sense. Trump said that if he did not get his way, there would be bedlam in this country. Asked about what he meant by bedlam in this country and about political violence, he talked about wars. The problem isn't that it didn't make any sense. The problem is that clearly it makes sense to him. What specifically could be wrong with someone who thinks when they say that they are making sense that everyone will understand? It's not like that from Trump is standalone in some way. The day began yesterday at the Hunter Biden hearings yesterday, and there was a subtext there that I thought seemed to get lost behind all of the stupidity. All the Republicans behaved as if they were not just stupid, not just staggering under the weight of their delusions of grandeur, but hallucinating. Is it that simple? You saw the Wall Street Journal story on Elon Musk consuming more drugs, according to the Wall Street Journal, than, state of New Mexico. Certainly you've heard by now that Hitler and the Nazi leadership were all on speed and other drugs throughout World War II. It's all documented by the Nazi physicians who gave them their Nazi drugs that helped make them Nazi. And then yesterday, we saw what we saw at the Hunter Biden hearings. There was Nancy Mace, the congresswoman who had boasted giddily last summer about reaching the prayer breakfast on time, but only by fending off morning sex with her boyfriend. She reached this hearing on time and not only focused on Hunter Biden's, quote, balls, but she then accused him of white privilege. He's white. She's white. I'm just going to guess she meant male privilege or white male privilege, but no, that's not what Nancy Mace said.
You are the epitome of white privilege, coming into the Oversight Committee, spitting in our face, ignoring a congressional subpoena to be deposed. What are you afraid of? You have no balls.
As we have fumbled for answers about what the hell happened to this country, specifically what the hell happened to the Republican Party, specifically, what the hell is it with people like Nancy Mace? Why are they in such thrall to loser J. Trump, who for brain chemistry reasons or other chemistry reasons or whatever is clearly, utterly, and constantly detached from reality? Could it be that simple?
Mr. Chairman, is this a joke? No, seriously, is this hearing a joke? This is a committee that now cares about subpoena compliance, and we're going to hold somebody in contempt for subpoena compliance? That's really interesting, because to me, it seems like you believe we all had our memories wiped 608 days ago when you failed to honor your own subpoena. But I have to ask, how dumb do you think the American people are that you would seek to hold someone in contempt when you are 608 days, 15 hours, 21 minutes, and 47 seconds out of compliance of your own subpoena.
Well, you know what, Eric Swalwell, heard wiping the floor there with Jim Jordan. You know what might explain that? You know what might explain the entire congressional career of Chairman James Comer? I mean, this with Jared Moskowitz. If the hearing had been a boxing match, it would have been stopped, and the referees and the state board would have made all the Republicans provide urine samples.
The witness accepted the chairman's invitation. It just so happens the witness is here. If the committee wants to hear from the witness and the chairman gave the witness that option, then the only folks that are afraid to hear from the witness with the American people watching are my friends on the other side of the aisle. I don't know if there's a proper motion, Mr. Chairman, but I'll make a motion. Let's vote. Let's take a vote. Who wants to hear from Hunter right now, today? Anyone? Come on. Who wants to hear from Hunter?
Motion's out over.
No one.
And of course, the pièce de résistance. Hunter Biden shows up. They won't let him testify. They decide to hold him in contempt for not testifying. And while they won't let him testify, Marjorie Taylor Greene starts shouting and trying to get him to testify, so he gets up and leaves. Now, what would explain Barney Rubble's stunt double's actions here?
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair recognizes Ms. Greene from Georgia for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excuse me, Hunter. Apparently you're afraid of my words.
Whoa! Oh.
I'd like to reclaim my time, Mr. Chairman.
Burst their bubble.
And then the networks cut away to cover the departure of the president's son, and Ms. Greene did not get her airtime. The president's son, now recommended for a contempt of Congress proceeding, recommended by people who also ignored subpoenas, because given a choice, as he was, of an in-private deposition or a public hearing, the president's son chose the latter and was then told, "Oh, sorry, we don't have that on the menu anymore." While that was unfolding, Marjorie Taylor Greene then showed blown-up photos of him naked, again, in an investigation about his father. Why would anybody do something like that? Without looking too closely at whatever is actually wrong with Marjorie Taylor Greene specifically, what are the generic options for that kind of behavior on a generic basis? Stupidity? Corruption? A pornography addiction?
And it's marked
Mr.
out.
Chairman, point
These
of
are
parliamentary
marked out,
point
showing
of parliamentary inquiry, Mr.
proof
Chairman.
of Mann
Okay.
Act violations. Democrats should not be
Okay.
offended by pictures
Mr.
that
Chairman,
black out.
Have I been
things.
recognized?
They should be
Objection. I have
offended
a
by
point of
actual
parliamentary
human
inquiry.
trafficking.
Mr.
Sorry,
Chairman,
state your point.
thank you kindly, Mr. Chairman. On July 26, I sent you a letter about the last time this happened, when the gentlelady introduced before this committee, without any notice to anyone, nude photos, pornographic images that were completely irrelevant to the purpose of the hearing itself. And my question to you is, are members allowed to simply put up sensationalistic, voyeuristic, pornographic images if they're not relevant to the actual object of the legislative proceeding? I want a parliamentary ruling on that.
Mr. Raskin, that's probably part of the questioning for Mr. Biden, violations of the Mann Act. Ms. Greene's led on that issue.
No, this is a question about the rules of the committee.
These pictures have already been entered into the record.
So in other words, you have accepted the idea that members can introduce irrelevant, sexually based, voyeuristic.
How is this irrelevant?
Well,
how does it relate to Joe Biden?
How does it relate to?
We're not doing a criminal investigation of Hunter Biden.
We've
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. Point of order.
Testified in the FBI.
And I haven't even gotten around to the conduct of the House Republicans' chief theater critic, Lauren Boebert. 2 on the aisle is worth 1 in the hand. Something. I know these evil idiots could just be evil idiots. Madison Cawthorn, Just another evil idiot. Pending further information, that has to be the assumption. Evil and idiocy can take you a long way in the Republican Party. But I was talking yesterday with somebody about how at the climax of the steroid drug problem in baseball, circa 2005, 2006, when a star like Mark McGwire, who broke the home run record, told Congress he was not there to talk about the past. And another star wagged his finger and said he never did steroids. And it turned out he did steroids. And a third pretended not to speak English. And then a book came out from Jose Canseco of the Oakland Athletics, who said he used to do steroids, and so did everybody else. And it had taken him months to find a publisher because nobody believed it and didn't want to take the risk. And it was all true. And worse was true. And Jose Canseco was the truth teller. And suddenly, God help me, I'd like to hear more from Madison Cawthorn, please. Now, if I sound a little raspy, or if you notice that there are only small segments of me and a lot of sound bites in this, I have been fighting a cranky throat since Christmas, and it's been getting more cranky. It's not serious. I'm fine. I don't even have a fever. The throat's been examined. It's just that my voice vanishes on me from time to time. It'll sound like this, and then it'll sound like, bye. You don't know this because I record this podcast, and I can re-record it anytime I need to, but that involves an awful lot of talking, and my ENT wants me to rest the voice as best I can. So I'm going to go gargle, and then I'll read you the worst persons list, including how, any way you slice it, ESPN fired Aaron Rodgers yesterday. If you'd be so kind as to listen to the commercials in the interim, that's next. This is Countdown.
This is Countdown with Keith Olbermann.
Time for the daily roundup of the miscreants, morons, and Dunning-Kruger effect specimens who constitute today's worst persons in the world. The bronze worse. For years, the states that have been the most arrogant and the most xenophobic about immigrants have been the same ones who've suddenly found shortages in their supply of manual labor. I recall more than a decade ago, most of Georgia's onion and watermelon crops rotted in the fields, and the state lost millions of dollars of income because the state was approximately 11,000 migrant laborers short. Well, sir, Indiana State Rep Joanna King is not going to let that happen in her state. She has introduced legislation that would, starting in July, let kids quit school in Indiana at the age of 14, as long as they have finished the 8th grade, so they could go to work as farm laborers, because the 19th century was terrific. The runner-up, worser, courtesy the excellent website Popular Information, the Escambia County School District in the Florida Panhandle. So what's the next step if you've already started banning books in Florida and trying to essentially ban students in Indiana and send them to go work in the fields? Don't worry, son, it'll be sunset soon. You do what they did in Escambia, just to make sure they didn't violate HB 1069, the Ron DeSantis bill that gives residents the right to remove any book from a library that depicts or describes sexual conduct. Escambia County has removed from its library the dictionary. Actually, 3 different dictionaries, and 2 thesauruses, and 8 encyclopedias, because they describe sexual conduct. Yeah, I got bad news for you geniuses. You know what other book describes sexual conduct, and therefore you damn well better ban it immediately? I believe the title is the Bible? But our winners, the worst, Pat McAfee, star of the new Big Sleeveless Pat show on ESPN, and his cohort, Aaron Rodgers of the New York Jets and ESPN. Well, just of the New York Jets. He's off ESPN, at least for now. Actually, he only played 4 snaps for the New York Jets, so it's Aaron Rodgers, formerly of the New York Jets and formerly of ESPN. After a week of controversies generated entirely by McAfee and Rodgers themselves for money, centering on defaming their Disney colleague Jimmy Kimmel and slamming key ESPN executives by name, one who they like and one who they do not like, and now the backlash starting, in which the ESPN football writer Dan Graziano went on the ESPN radio morning show yesterday and described Aaron Rodgers as, quote, obviously a liar and a narcissistic con artist who is bad for everything he touches, unquote. After all that, this guy, Sleeveless McAfee, announced that Aaron Rodgers will not appear again on the ESPN show for the rest of this National Football League season, even though McAfee is paying Rodgers more than $1 million a year to appear on the show during the National Football League season. So Aaron Rodgers got fired, and McAfee insisted, and a lot of off-the-record sources insisted, and ESPN insisted that this was McAfee's call, in which case it was McAfee throwing Aaron Rodgers under the bus. And I approve. But it doesn't matter. It's the proverbial distinction without a difference. Big Sleeveless Pat might very well have made the actual phone call. Hey, Aaron, you're not on anymore. But I'm going to go way out on a limb. Now, somebody who worked at ESPN full-time on 3 separate occasions in 2 different centuries and freelance another 2 times, and all that over the span of 5 different decades, I'm going to bet that somebody at ESPN gave Pat McAfee this choice. Pat, Aaron Rodgers used the anti-Semitic puppet imagery again Tuesday and then went off on a 10-minute anti-vax rant, and we have somehow convinced Jimmy Kimmel not to sue him yet, and not to sue you yet, Pat. So you fire Aaron Rodgers, or we will do it for you. And if we have to do it for you, you're gone too. The problem is, Pat McAfee should have known to do this a week ago, not a day ago, and ESPN should have known this was going to happen, because this is almost exactly what happened with Rush Limbaugh when they hired him 20 years ago. And all that means that you can almost bet that something like this will happen on Pat McAfee's show again real soon. Big shirtless Pat. And Aaron, at least he lasted longer on ESPN than he did with the Jets' Rodgers. Today's worst persons in the world. I've done all the damage I can do here on Countdown. Thank you for listening. This time it's literally damage to myself. As I mentioned earlier, my ENT agreed to let me keep talking, provided I cut back today. So you've just heard the streamlined version. I'm not Lloyd Austining you here. I'm not sick. There's nothing seriously wrong structurally. They're not worried about my throat. It's just everything is strained from projecting while sick. It'll get better. Thanks for your indulgence. Countdown musical directors Brian Ray and John Philip Chanel arranged, produced, and performed most of our music. Mr. Ray on guitars, bass, and drums. Mr. Chanel on orchestration and keyboards. It was produced by TKO Brothers. Other music performed and arranged by No Horns Allowed. Sports music, the Olbermann theme from ESPN2, written by Mitch Warren Davis, courtesy of ESPN Inc. Our satirical and pithy musical comments from Nancy Faust, the best baseball stadium organist ever. And our announcer today was my friend Richard Lewis. And everything else was pretty much my fault. So that's Countdown for this, the 300th day until the 2024 U.S. presidential election and the 1,099th day since Dementia J. Trump's first attempted coup against the democratically elected government of the United States. Use the 14th Amendment, the Insurrection Act, and the justice system to stop him from doing it again while we still can. The next scheduled countdown is tomorrow. I want to raise the possibility that I'm going to skip it based on the throat. So if there isn't one showing up in your mailbox, don't be surprised or alarmed. Until next time, whenever next time is, as the news anchor at the station I interned for in 1978 used to say, thank you for your time this time till next time. I'm Keith Olbermann. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, and good luck.
Biden.